Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. With that said, though, do want to switch gears, and let's get to our old buddy, Jim Harbaugh. Not sure if you remember last show. It was on Wednesday. Thought it was a pretty good show. And on that show, I talked about Jim Harbaugh, the NFL, and the Minnesota Vikings. And as I recorded, literally as I recorded, Jim Harbaugh was meeting with the Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota. Few hours later, meeting gets over. Few hours later, after this podcast is posted, we get the big, bold, triumphant headline. Jim Harbaugh announces he's returning to Michigan. The problem is that it really isn't that simple. Because if you really read the headlines and if you really read the details, you find out pretty quickly. Jim Harbaugh was never offered the Minnesota Vikings job. Minnesota was not going to offer Jim Harbaugh the Minnesota Vikings job. And so I bring it up and I want to talk about it now because I do think I did have a thought as it comes to Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh very clearly pursued NFL opportunities this year in a way that he never has. And I do wonder, if he couldn't get an NFL job in this particular cycle, coming off the season that he did at Michigan, 12-1, 12-2, playoff Big Ten championship, beat Ohio State, if he could not get an NFL opportunity off that, then I truly believe that it might be time to put aside the idea of head coach Jim Harbaugh in the NFL and the reality that he is going to spend the rest of his career with the Michigan Wolverines. And so let's talk about it. Let's discuss. Let's debate. Because if you follow just the headlines, you would have thought that Jim Harbaugh, he made a triumphant return to Michigan. He's turning down the NFL. He's coming back. He's this, he's that. Hail to the victors. But it's not that simple. It never is. Because if you read the details, what you know is this. As I said a minute ago, Jim Harbaugh went to Minnesota to meet with the Vikings. Now, to his credit, he was one of 3 finalists for the job. He met with the team for 9 hours. But what is also important to note is that he was not offered the job. 9-hour interview, was not offered the job, did not turn it down, did not return to Michigan over just simply, he didn't return to Michigan. There was no other job for him to turn down to return to Michigan. Instead, he leaves the meeting. They say, thank you for your time. I don't know every detail, but at some point it became pretty clear that while he was a finalist, Minnesota is going to eventually hire Kevin O'Connell, the offensive coordinator of the Los Angeles Rams. And so we have this Minnesota Vikings situation in which Jim Harbaugh clearly pursued the Minnesota Vikings. To his credit, he got an interview, but he didn't get the job. And he didn't get the job in a cycle where, by the way, let's never forget, he also, as we discussed on last episode, very publicly leaked that the Las Vegas Raiders were interested and very publicly leaked that the Chicago Bears were interested. Well, we know for certain that the Chicago Bears did not offer him a job. They didn't even offer him an interview. I don't even know if he got a call back. We also know that the Las Vegas Raiders did not seriously pursue him. And so that is 3 marquee jobs in a coaching cycle where over a quarter of the jobs in the NFL had flipped over. Jim Harbaugh couldn't get one of them. And so when I look at this whole Jim Harbaugh thing in the bigger picture, I do wonder, is it possible that we have seen the end of the Jim Harbaugh era in the NFL? He clearly pursued NFL jobs. There was certainly interest. But never forget, 5-6 years ago when he first left the NFL for Michigan, coming off that run in San Francisco, 3 NFC championship games, 1 Super Bowl, a near Super Bowl win, Jim Harbaugh was the hottest candidate in the NFL. He could have left after his first season, after his second season, after his third season, and absolutely unequivocally gotten an NFL job. Now fast forward to 2022, and I'm starting to wonder if it ever happens again. And it's partly because of Jim Harbaugh, but it's partly because of where the NFL is going, right? Jim Harbaugh would have been the ideal candidate 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. Sort of, he wasn't young, but he was in his early 50s, and he was the quirky guy, but he was winning a bunch of games. Well, time has changed. And time has changed, especially in the NFL. And this isn't even a criticism of Harbaugh, who has been, you guys listen to the show. I've been the biggest Jim Harbaugh supporter that there is. But as you look at what the NFL is doing, I don't know that he fits the criteria of what the NFL is looking for in their hires anymore. Jim Harbaugh's older. Jim Harbaugh really doesn't have a specialty on either side of the ball. He's more of the overseer, the CEO type head coach, like Dabo Swinney, like Coach O was. I know Jim Harbaugh's background is in offense, but at this point, he doesn't run the offense. He doesn't call plays. That's Josh Gaddis. So he's more of a CEO head coach. He's older. He's kind of the older head coach, not really relatable. The players like him, but he's not that young, whatever. And so when I look at what the NFL is doing in their hirings, look at all of the hirings that the NFL is doing right now. And I know it's a copycat league and trends change all the time. But look at the hires this cycle. Young, offensive-minded, relatable, all those things. Basically the Sean McVay prototype. And we can make fun of the Sean McVay prototype, and we did it a few years ago when all the head coaches that were hired basically looked like him. Young, they had stubble, they were handsome, they were this, they were that. But the Sean McVay prototype's clearly working, right? Sean McVay, 2 Super Bowls in 5 years. Sean McVay might win a Super Bowl, might be the youngest head coach to ever win a Super Bowl if things are successful. Oh, by the way, the guy he's coaching against in the Super Bowl is it's the first time ever we've had 2 coaches under the age of 40 in the Super Bowl. And so I do believe that the NFL, everybody's looking for that next Sean McVay and that Sean McVay prototype. Young, offensive-minded, relatable. Those are not words that you would describe Jim Harbaugh as. So you look at the hires this year. Nathaniel Hackett, Denver Broncos, fits that bill. Kevin O'Connell, the guy I just mentioned, going to the Minnesota Vikings, fits that bill. On top of that, the guys that are already in the league, McVay, Matt LaFleur, Green Bay Packers, Cliff Kingsbury, Brandon Staley, all fit the same bill. And I do just wonder if we're in this world where the NFL has moved on from the Jim Harbaugh type coach. Not saying that he could never be a head coach again. It only takes one team to call you. But at the end of the day, there are certain trends going on in the NFL, and I don't know that Harbaugh fits them. And so now I think we have to talk about the reality that he will eventually retire at Michigan. And if he does, I'm just fascinated to see what the next 4, 5, 6 years look like under Jim Harbaugh. 58 years old, going to be 59 by the end of next season, coming off his first Big Ten title. What does the next few years look like? Because I think on the one hand, I do see a lot of positive signs, right? We all saw we all read the headlines last year, and I talked about it a lot on the show. But to Jim Harbaugh's credit, he basically shook up everything, and it worked. Younger staff, again, more dynamic, relatable, good recruiters, whatever. And Michigan, to its credit, and I talked about it in the previous segment, is coming off a really good recruiting class. They are set at the quarterback position. Cade McNamara's coming back. His backup, J.J. McCarthy, might be better. And we saw J.J. McCarthy in that college football playoff game. He actually was the only guy that could make plays against Georgia. And so Jim Harbaugh may finally have his quarterback of the present, quarterback of the future, and J.J. McCarthy. On top of that, I'll say this. The Big Ten, there's no certainties, not even Ohio State. And I do think Ohio State bounces back, and I trust Ryan Day, and this isn't a Ryan Day is completely overrated, blah, 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 this and that. I don't think so. But at the same time, we all watch that Rose Bowl. I know Ohio State has a new defensive coordinator. Ohio State's got a lot of work to do on defense. They're going to score a bunch of points with C.J. Stroud, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Marvin Harrison Jr., Travion Henderson, but they're going to give up a lot of points too unless that new defensive coordinator, that new defensive staff can work a ton of magic. Beyond that, look, I know Michigan State's on the rise. We'll see if Mel Tucker can maintain it. We know Penn State is going to be Penn State, but Penn State's kind of plateaued the last 2-3 years. And so if we now know Harbaugh's coming back, I do think there is an avenue to continue to win at the highest level. I don't think he's winning the Big Ten next year. I don't think he's beating Ohio State every year. But I can see the scenario where he now has the foundation of a program that can beat Ohio State. And we talked about this after the Ohio State game. I could see the scenario where Harbaugh can beat Ohio State 2 out of every 5 years, 3 out of every 5 years. Who knows if Ryan Day goes to the NFL at some point, then what happens at Ohio State? Do they go get Luke Fickell? Do they go get somebody else? Whatever. But what I would also say is, I think there's a possibility that Michigan has a ton of success going forward. I also think there's a reality that this program was going in the wrong direction heading into this year. Now, to Harbaugh's credit, he changed up everything, shook up his staff, kind of stepped back, wasn't so much of a micromanager, let his staff do whatever. But all the stars seemed to align last year for Michigan, and so now we're going to see how good Harbaugh is. Because the NFL clearly was not interested in Jim Harbaugh, and again, that's always subject to change. But it looks like he is going to be at Michigan not only this year, but for the foreseeable future. Even in that statement, he told Ward Manuel, he said, this isn't going to be an annual thing with the NFL. I just wanted to scratch that itch to see if it was there. It wasn't. I'm back. I'm ready to work, and I'm ready to retire here. Do I really believe him? Do I really believe he will never pursue the NFL again? I can't say that I do. But I do wonder, man, Michigan's coming off the best season that they've had in decades. Jim Harbaugh is at the highest level that he can be as a head coach in terms of success, in terms of whatever, and he still couldn't get an NFL job when he very clearly pursued him. Again, this was not, I'm going to take the call. I'm going to listen if they call me. This was him very clearly pursuing at least 3 NFL head coaching jobs and none of them being interested.